Well, I think we have a very substantial interest in the conflict we see unfolding in front of us and how it comes out. That doesn't mean to me necessarily getting involved militarily on one side or the other. I think if you calculate what's most at stake in the broader region, it's still the threat from Iran, from its nuclear weapons program, from its financing and arming of terrorists around the world. So that's one reason I would not put military advisors in or otherwise cooperate with the al-Maliki regime, which is effectively a subsidiary of the Ayatollahs in Tehran.
Yeah, precisely. And if our principal enemy is Iran, why would we send 300 advisors to help Nouri al-Maliki when we're supporting then the Shiites, who are essentially Iraq and Iran?
Right. Well, under the control of Iran, at least the al-Maliki government is now. Even the Shiites are divided, and some have called for al-Maliki to be replaced. That would be a step forward. But let's look at the Sunnis, too. You're absolutely right. ISIS is, if anything, worse than al-Qaeda in terms of its terrorist threat. But there are other Sunnis, tribal leaders, even former Baathists from the Saddam era, who don't like being oppressed by al-Maliki any better than anybody else. And they're fighting against al-Maliki, too. They're not necessarily our enemies. So the point is, the situation on the ground in Iraq is very confused at this point, not the kind of environment to put in American forces. And it diverts us, as the Obama administration has been diverted for 5.5 years, from the main enemy. And the main enemy is Iran.
Well, can I ask you, do you think there can be any kind of effective partition of Iraq? Would that solve the problem? You give some to the Sunnis, the Kurds, and the Shias.
Well, I think Iraq is moving in that direction. I don't think that outcome is inevitable. But if you look at the map of what ISIS and its Sunni allies have taken, some people have said Baghdad's going to fall, the country's going to fall. No, it's not. What they have taken is basically the Sunni Arab part of Iraq. And that is a prescription, if they're able to hold it, which is another open question. But if they're able to hold it, I think that would result effectively in partition. Look, the Kurds have been de facto independent for 20 years already.
All right. And what do you think about what has happened? I mean, the administration, again, seems to have been caught off guard. I mean, should we have known this? Should we have seen it coming? Or is this, you know, just the excuse that the administration uses for everything from the VA to the IRS? I mean, they don't know anything. Should they have known about this?
They certainly don't know anything, and I think that's another subject for a legitimate congressional investigation, nonpartisan to be sure, because if the intelligence community thought this was coming and the White House didn't pay attention, that's very serious indeed. I think it's just part of the Obama administration's disinclination to pay attention to threats to American national security around the world. This is just the most recent in a long list, sadly.
Well, and you know, the takedown of Khatallah, I mean, 2 years later, and I have to tell you, I'm glad that they finally arrested him, but I mean, how do they justify the fact that everybody and his mother spoke to this guy, and now, you know, that his numbers are low, he decides to make an arrest in the Benghazi case?
Well, I think there's a legitimate question. Why the timing now? I mean, you can't pin it down to a day or maybe even a week. I acknowledge the military and the intelligence community need some time to put it together. They could have done it 16 or 18 months ago. There's no reason they waited this long, at least no good reason in my view. And that's a subject for another congressional investigation. And,
you know, this whole idea of the indictment against Khatallah, it's interesting that they don't indict him or charge him with what happened at the annex, but only at what happened with the ambassador at the consulate, which tells me, Ambassador, that, you know, they would have had to have admitted that it was premeditated to get in the rocket-propelled grenades, et cetera, that was used on the annex. And then they would have to contradict themselves. I think it's all about the politics of Khatallah and his coming here and saying, you're all crazy. There was no video. We did it because we hate you.
Yeah, look, he's going to use this trial in federal court in Washington, which looks to be the venue, as a propaganda campaign against the United States. And it reflects the fundamental philosophical mistake Obama's made. This is not a criminal law matter. The war on terrorism, which was launched against us, should be treated as a war. This guy should be on his way to Gitmo for a long, long time of very intensive investigation.
Ambassador, with all due respect, we send him to Gitmo and we let him go. We don't even try them. Look at the 5 that were traded for Bergdahl.
No, it's a travesty what Obama's doing, and we are going to be much less safe all around the world as a consequence of this. A lot of these releases took place at the end of the Bush administration. That was a mistake, too. There's a nonpartisan comment for you.
All right, good. Enough blame to go around. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Stick around. A packed show tonight. More in Iraq. And are Americans in danger from the thousands of immigrants who are crossing our borders? The latest IRS shocker. And what can the Benghazi terrorists tell us about possible future attacks? And vote tonight.